Ibrahim Taore said no. And I am very sure this time around, it is not going to be business as usual. I don't want to talk too much. Share this video, like it, comment your opinion from wherever you're watching from. God bless you.
Trump wanted 90% of Burkina Faso's oil and gold in 24 hours. No negotiations, just submission. But what he got was war drums. One president, three armies, one silent rebellion that the world never saw coming. Subscribe now. Africa is rising, and this is just the first page. A single line buried in a classified cable, just one sentence, but loud enough to shake the spine of a continent. President Ibrahim has 24 hours. Deliver 90% of the oil and gold, or face consequences. At the bottom, in thick red ink, a name written like a command: Donald J. Trump. But this wasn't official US foreign policy. This was something darker. Trump, no longer sitting behind a presidential desk, had begun moving through the shadows, wielding global business power like a private army. Through secretive back channels and diplomatic mercenaries, he was now leading what insiders called an economic blitzkrieg, and his latest target was rich, untapped, and defiant: Burkina Faso. There were no negotiations, no summit, no room for compromise. Trump's message wasn't laced with diplomacy. It reeked of empire. The demand? Near total control over one of Africa's newest oil discoveries and command of its gold routes. The tone? Ruthless, cold, transactional. "We saved you from terrorism," Trump allegedly said. "Now you pay us back." But what Trump didn't expect, what none of his backers expected, was the man sitting on the other side of that letter. President Ibrahim didn't flinch. He didn't stall. He called in two people, his military commander and his intelligence chief, and in a single sentence, he changed the course of African history. "Tell the Americans, this land is not for sale." That refusal wasn't just a statement. It was a spark, and it lit a fire across every screen from Lagos to Johannesburg, from Harlem to Hackney. Trump demands African gold. Ibrahim given 24 hours. But for once, Africa didn't tremble. It stood. Because this time, the threat didn't land on the desk of a puppet. It landed in the hands of a soldier. A captain who had grown up with dust in his lungs and iron in his spine. A man who'd seen what submission had cost the continent and refused to add one more signature to the chain. This is not just a political drama. This is the real front line of sovereignty. This is how empires speak. And this is how Africa answers. The door closed behind the intelligence chief with a quiet click. Outside, the capital hummed under its usual rhythm. But inside the presidential compound, a new order had taken hold. President Ibrahim stood at the center of a dimly lit war room, maps of national assets projected across walls, oil routes, gold mines, communication towers, cross-border checkpoints, all pulsing red. Not from fear, from readiness. The refusal had been spoken. Now came the response. No meetings were scheduled, no statements drafted. This was not diplomacy. This was mobilization. The president turned to his defense minister. "Lock down the Eastern Oil Corridor." Burkina Faso's petroleum zone, still classified in public maps, was immediately placed under restricted status. All civilian movement suspended, all foreign observers grounded, surveillance drones repositioned into continuous patrol cycles. Any unauthorized signal in or out was to be traced, jammed, and reported directly to the presidency. Next, the gold. Burkina Faso's gold wealth wasn't just a national resource, it was a lifeline. In 2023, the country had produced over 57 tons of gold. Nearly 80% of its total exports were tied to the metal. More than 1/5 of the state budget depended on it. And now, that gold was under siege. President Ibrahim summoned the leadership of SOPEMIB, the state-owned gold agency. His order was simple: no ounce leaves this country without state protection. Immediately, all export routes were rerouted through military-escorted corridors. Two major sites, Bangu and Wagnion, were placed under full control of the Sovereignty Force, a shadow military unit, activated solely for moments of existential threat. Every foreign gold contractor was handed a single document. License under review. Standby for exit notice. Simultaneously, the Ministry of Communication entered blackout mode. International press access was restricted. No foreign signal was permitted to transmit live data from energy zones. The national broadcaster received its mandate: prepare for a full-spectrum information war. No fear, no retreat. Tell the story on African terms, or not at all. But the president knew real resistance wasn't built in bunkers, it was built in people. And the people had already begun to rise. In Ouagadougou, women, some old enough to remember colonial rule, gathered before military barracks at dawn. They carried bundles of rice, water, and medicine. Their message was quiet, but unshakable. We feed those who defend us. University students turned campus discussion halls into planning cells, not for protest, but for logistics. They drafted rosters for night patrols, support lines for border villages, translations of the president's speech into 10 regional languages. Taxi drivers rerouted trips for free. Fishermen delivered dried goods to inland garrisons. In one town, miners marched to the local prefecture and volunteered for surveillance duty. No one told them to move. They simply did. Across Africa, the story bled across borders. In Ghana, retired soldiers offered to train Burkinabe recruits. In Tanzania, activists launched a Defend the Soil campaign. In Trinidad, radio hosts replayed Ibrahim's speech every morning at dawn. And in the United Kingdom, Black British organizers held a vigil outside the Foreign Office with a single placard: Africa has drawn the line. Meanwhile, inside the presidential compound, no one celebrated. President Ibrahim moved room to room, reviewing encrypted maps, watching satellite footage, reading intercepted memos from foreign embassies. He wasn't waiting for their next move. He was preparing for it. Burkina Faso was no longer merely resisting. It was reinforcing, not just its borders, but its belief. That sovereignty wasn't a speech. It was a system, one that could be protected, defended, lived. And as the sun fell behind the Sahel hills, one truth hung in the air like smoke. The game had changed, and President Ibrahim wasn't playing defense anymore. It was never supposed to be found. Beneath the cracked clay of northern Burkina Faso, between forgotten villages and fractured roads, lay something hidden for generations. Not myth, not legend, but power. Real, liquid, dark power. Oil. President Ibrahim had suspected it for years. Quiet whispers from old surveyors, scattered geological reports buried in colonial archives. And so, long before the world's eyes turned his way, he moved. A covert task force was formed, made up of engineers, military officers, and specialists sworn to silence. The operation drew from 3 continents. Russian seismic experts mapped the fault lines. Iranian drones scanned terrain under the cover of dusk. North Korean coders built encryption layers deeper than any Western protocol. No officials knew. No allies were informed. The operation was locked inside the presidency. And then it happened. A drill cracked the earth. Pressure hissed upward. And what emerged changed everything. Not droplets, not traces, a pressurized flow strong enough to rewrite the country's future. But Burkina Faso wasn't alone in watching. Hundreds of kilometers above, a different kind of eye blinked open. Thermal satellites operated by foreign powers, tuned to detect the smallest energy disruptions. The flare was unmistakable. An oil strike in a zone never registered by international energy maps. Within 48 hours, alarm signals bounced between Virginia, Paris, and Brussels. US intelligence labeled the event a sovereign petroleum anomaly. France flagged a strategic realignment risk. Chevron called an emergency board meeting. The panic wasn't about oil. It was about who had found it and who hadn't been invited. Because this wasn't a multinational contract. This wasn't debt-based extraction. This was a Burkinabe-owned well, guarded by troops, managed by the state, and completely off-grid from global control. More disturbing still, the operation had already begun scaling. Equipment from Venezuela was seen crossing Beninese highways. Coded messages referenced a sovereign corridor linking Burkina to allied ports. No IMF, no World Bank, no Western insurance brokers. That's when the narrative war began. Major networks launched coordinated coverage. Authoritarian oil expansion. Energy mismanagement threatens West Africa. Isolationist leader destabilizing the region. Pundits warned of a second Libya. Anchors questioned Ibrahim's mental fitness. Leaked briefings painted the country as an emerging rogue state. But something was different this time. The message didn't stick. In Bamako, students painted murals of oil wells draped in Burkinabe flags. In Lusaka, digital artists released posters captioned, "He found it, not for sale." Black activists across the UK, US, and Caribbean reshared Ibrahim's speech over trap beats, over jazz, over silence. Burkina Faso wasn't just drilling oil. It was drilling into history. The fear in the West wasn't unfounded. Ibrahim had not only discovered buried wealth, he had exposed a buried truth. Africa's resources were never lost. They were hidden, suppressed, stolen. Now, the script had flipped. The continent had watched too many leaders sell futures in boardrooms and return home with press statements. But this one, this soldier, had made his move before they could react. That terrified them, because if oil could be found, protected, refined, and exported without their banks, without their approvals, then their entire model collapsed. Burkina Faso had raised the flag. Now others were watching. If you believe Africa should own what lies beneath its soil, comment below. Type Amen to stand with Ibrahim. For 72 hours, the world held its breath. Would Burkina Faso stand alone? Then came the thunder of engines. 3 military planes touched down on a quiet airstrip in Ouagadougou. No flags, no diplomatic entourages, no press, just 3 men. From Mali, Colonel Assimi Goïta, calm, silent, steel in his eyes. From Niger, General Abdourahmane Chiani, battle-tested, fire-set face. From Guinea, Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, broad-shouldered, walking like he owed nothing to anyone. They entered the presidential chamber without translators, without scripts. The handshake with President Ibrahim wasn't ceremony, it was brotherhood. And when they emerged, the continent shifted. At the joint press podium, no teleprompters, no rehearsed applause. Doumbouya spoke first. Touch Burkina Faso, and you touch all of us. It was more than a warning, it was doctrine. The AES, Alliance of Sahel States, had become more than an acronym. It was now a shield, forged not in treaties, but in fire. Coups, blockades, betrayal, and shared resistance. Within 24 hours, the alliance moved. AES reconnaissance drones began patrol sweeps along Burkina Faso's border. Encrypted comms linked mining zones to joint regional command centers. Emergency airspace corridors were opened between Niamey, Bamako, Conakry, and Ouagadougou. And still, they didn't stop. Mali dispatched veteran field strategists to reinforce oil installation security. Niger sent desert-hardened logistics teams. Guinea offered its airspace for any emergency aerial response. The alliance had activated, militarily, logistically, symbolically. But the most powerful weapon wasn't steel, it was story. AES-run media outlets launched a counter-offensive. No studio suits, no corporate filters, just raw footage, facts, and fury. One headline echoed continent-wide: Africa is not your gold mine, not your gas pump, not your back door. In Bamako, university students marched in coordinated waves wearing t-shirts bearing Ibrahim's silhouette. In Conakry, street artists painted him atop oil drums, cloak blowing, flag of Burkina Faso in one hand, documents marked confidential, US threat in the other. In Niamey, mothers brought food to army training camps, chanting, "He said no, now we stand with him." Even in countries outside the AES.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.